morning and welcome to our series of background briefings on Space Shuttle Mission 51L.
Just a little overview of the flight. Launch date is January 22nd on orbiter OV-99, the Challenger. Liftoff time right now is scheduled for 1940 GMT. Nominal into-mission landing time is 6 days, 0 hours and 34 minutes MET, and that's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon Central Standard Time.
For space, return to Earth and be reused. In order to become commercially successful, the flight schedule had become increasingly ambitious. 9 flights in 1985, 15 scheduled for 1986. But behind the routine, a system under increasing strain.
In other words, once this one gets launched, for example, you don't even have a time to wipe your brow, you know. You got another one coming right behind you, you know. So you got to make...
Vince Vandenberg, Space Shuttle Ground Crew Supervisor.
And yes, I mean, just bang, bang, back and forth with no let-up.
The system had also been weakened by other factors. A manpower shortage affected many key areas, including quality control.
This was a problem for us many times, that jobs were basically held up or slowed up because of no quality control.
A spare parts shortage forced workers to cannibalize other vehicles for parts.
We robbed one vehicle to fly another. You may have one item to support 4 vehicles. So you got to go find the damn thing. And sometimes this is actually what we do, find. And this isn't the way that system should be.
One of the most serious problems involved the rocket boosters, designed to be reused after each flight. The joint that connects the segments of the rocket booster is a system in which the upper segment fits into the slot of the lower segment. The joint is completed by 2 rubber O-rings. After rocket ignition, the explosive pressure causes the segments to bulge, enlarging the gap in the joint. By that time, the first O-ring is expected to have moved into position, sealing the gap. If the gap does not seal, hot gases from the booster could leak out, leading to a catastrophic accident. The Presidential Commission would later find that the joint was flawed, and there were warnings about it 9 years ago. In this 1985 memo, Morton Thiokol engineer Roger Beaujolais urged immediate action. He recently read the memo at a Presidential Commission hearing.
It is my honest and very real fear that if we do not take immediate action to dedicate a team to solve the problem, then we stand in jeopardy of losing a flight along with all the launch pad facilities.
Richard Cook was a budget analyst with NASA in the summer of 1985.
A plan was developed to make a repair that was not going to be implemented for well over a year. And I think during that time, people were just going to kind of hope that nothing went wrong.
Launch of Flight 51L is now scheduled for 9:37 a.m. It's been delayed 5 times, the latest slip caused by predicted bad weather at the Cape the day before. NASA officials are concerned that the delays will interfere with the other 13 shuttle flights scheduled for this year. The crew suits up in the White Room, the room that provides access to the orbiter. At 7:21, the crew enters the cabin.
We got a problem on removing one of the screws.
At 9:22, the ground crew encounters a problem removing the latch on the cabin door. After considerable difficulty, the latch is finally removed. Launch is now scheduled for 12:06 p.m.
We're at T-minus 19 minutes, 58 seconds, and counting.
But crosswinds have kicked up, and the launch is scrubbed and rescheduled for the next day, Tuesday, January 28th at 9:38 a.m.
This is Shuttle Launch Control. The weather in the Florida area is going to continue to get much colder.
As the disappointed crew exits the cabin, it's predicted that the temperatures will drop below freezing overnight, reaching 26 degrees by launch time in the morning. It will be colder than any previous launch. 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Morton Thiokol engineers meet at the company's plant in Brigham City, Utah, to discuss the effects of the cold on the rocket boosters. Engineer Roger Beaujolais was there.
That meeting concluded with the tempo that there was a valid concern for temperature, low temperature.
A telephone conference, or a telecon, is set up between the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama, where the rocket design is supervised, and Thiokol's Utah plant. The telecon begins at 9 p.m.
So that night, we presented the information on the basis of what we knew. And what we knew, and I feel very strong about it, is that we had a problem with temperature.
The engineers had reviewed test data indicating that cold temperatures caused the rubber O-rings in the joint to become harder, less likely to seal the gap in the joint.
The conclusions were that we should not fly outside of our database, which was 53 degrees.
But Lawrence Malloy and other NASA officials object to Thiokol's recommendation not to launch.
That was an engineering conclusion, which I found this conclusion without basis, and I challenged its logic.
NASA official George Hardy states that he is appalled at Thiokol's position, but also says that they would not fly without Thiokol's concurrence. At 10:15 p.m., Morton Thiokol, feeling pressure to change their no-launch recommendation, asked for time off the line for a caucus in Utah. The meeting is split between Thiokol management, led by Senior Vice President Gerald Mason, and Thiokol engineers, led by Roger Beaujolais.
So we spoke out and tried to explain, once again, the effects of low temperature.
But Beaujolais and the other engineers are overruled.
Mr. Mason said, we have to make a management decision. He turned to Bob Blunt and asked him to take off his engineering hat and put on his management hat.
Mason then conducts a poll of Thiokol management.
And we did conduct that poll, and then we did conclude that it was safe to launch.
I did not agree with some of the statements that were being made to support the decision. I was never asked nor polled.
At Cape Canaveral, Thiokol engineer Alan McDonald told NASA officials that he also remained opposed to the launch.
In fact, I made the direct statement that if anything happened to this launch, told him I sure wouldn't want to be the person that had to stand in front of a board of inquiry.
But despite the objections of the engineers, at 11:30 p.m., Morton Thiokol telefaxes NASA its final recommendation to launch. That night, as predicted, the temperatures at Cape Canaveral drop below freezing.
That wind comes off of that ocean, and it is cold. And so you notice the cold more down there than you do probably elsewhere. And yes, it was cold.
January 28th, 1986, 1:30 a.m., NASA sends an ice team to inspect the severe ice conditions on the pad. The team also records temperatures of 9 and 23 degrees on the solid rocket boosters, but does not report the findings to the launch director. Under procedure, it was not required.
This is shuttle launch control at T-minus 2 hours, 28 minutes and counting. Here comes the 51L flight crew.
7:48 a.m. The countdown proceeds. As the flight crew once again leaves for the pad, there's continuing concern about the ice conditions. One contractor, Rockwell, continues to oppose launch.
We still are at a position that is a bit of a Russian roulette.
9:04 a.m. The crew cabin is sealed. A senior NASA management meeting gives the final go for launch. Rockwell's concerns about the ice are inadequately communicated. The effects of the cold on the solid rocket boosters is not discussed. The Presidential Commission later revealed that NASA's lines of communications were poor, that crucial life and death decisions were not reaching senior management level.
9, 8, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff.
A split second after ignition, smoke emerges near the joint between the rear segments of the right booster. The joint has failed, and gases are burning through. The smoke continues for 2.5 seconds and then temporarily stops. But the smoke is not seen by the controllers, and the Challenger continues its ascent.
During the first phases of flight, there's not much you can do. So you tend to scan the systems, and we did that, and everything was looking just as it should.
Increased pressure on the accelerating vehicle and strong crosswinds violently jar the already weakened seal. At 58 seconds, the joint fails again, and a plume of flame appears on the right booster. The plume from the booster intensifies as it burns through and deflects onto the large external tank. Like a giant blowtorch, the plume ruptures the external tank.
Challenger, go with throttle up. Challenger, go with throttle up.
At 73 seconds, an intense flash fire rapidly erupts, causing the total and final breakup of the vehicle. At Mission Control, shock, as seen in this film obtained first by 2020. Green asked his colleagues, was there any sign of trouble?
Nothing, sir. I looked at all the trim and temps are perfect, right on the prediction.
Arm you.
We look good flying.
DPS.
All our data's normal flight.
Rob.
Everything looked good flight.
Tomorrow, June 6th, the Presidential Commission will present its report to the White House. The report will recommend a major redesign of the flawed booster joint and other troubled parts, including the brakes, main engines, and fuel valves. It will recommend sweeping changes in NASA's management structure and the launch decision-making process. And it will recommend that the astronauts play a more active role throughout the shuttle program. As